Are worries and our mind two different things? No, they are not. Worries arise from our mind, and wisdom also comes from the same mind. Wisdom and worries are opposites, but those opposing senses actually come from the same source. The difference between them is only a difference in manifestation, so Huineng spoke his verse in response to this point. This verse represents a state of emptiness, eliminating our prejudiced mind about the external world being separate, and it says, originally there is not a thing, where comes the dust? After eliminating everything, does it mean that there is nothing left? At the time, Huineng did not know, he just let go of everything. But after letting go, it doesn't mean that there is nothing left, there still remains one sense of the world. After the elimination, does it mean that there is nothing left? At the time, Huineng didn't know, he simply eliminated without clinging to anything. After elimination, it doesn't mean that there is nothing at all. In the Diamond Sutra, the central idea is expressed in 8 Chinese words. In English, to be detached from everything, giving rise to the inherent mind. Now, when we look at Huineng's verse, it corresponds to the first 4 words of the Diamond Sutra. We should not be attached to the apparent existence of external things, they are merely dust. If you cling to them, they are still dust, and you are caught in the cycle of attachment. And if you believe that your thoughts are originally pure and cling to the appearance of purity, even the appearance of purity cannot be clung to. Therefore, it is said to have no attachment, to eliminate everything. After the elimination of everything, what comes? The inherent mind, the true mind. Huineng didn't know this yet. He didn't understand what the inherent mind meant. Of course, every one of us, including myself, our own sense of self-importance and differentiation from others, is all illusions, not the inherent mind. It is still falsehood. We will explain this point later. That's why I said that Master Hongren used a shoe to wipe away Huineng's verse. This action itself embodies the essence of Zen. Huineng's verse speaks of a state of emptiness. But if you remain fixated on the state of emptiness, you have not entered the gate. You have not yet seen the inherent mind. So, in response to this verse about emptiness, wiping it away once again signifies the state of no emptiness. This action embodies the essence of Zen. Alright, let's pause here for now. Consider this as my opening statement for today. Let's discuss the Platform Sutra and explore the wisdom of Zen Buddhism through it. Now, Mr. Mao Zongsan, died 1995, was a key figure in the modern-day study of New Confucianism in China, and he has discussed Zen Buddhism. This is how he evaluates Zen Buddhism. He said, Zen Buddhism is not just the wisdom of the Chinese people, but the highest wisdom of humanity. Whether this evaluation is accurate or not, let's put that aside for now. Let's try to understand. To quote Mr. Mao Zongsan's statement more completely. He said, Buddhism is originally about practice, and it is remarkable that practice can be carried out in the way of Zen Buddhism. But practicing in the way of Zen Buddhism is not only extraordinary but exceptionally extraordinary, extremely extraordinary. It truly opens up new horizons for humanity, and this is not just the wisdom of the Chinese people, but the highest wisdom of humanity. His statement is pretty much on point, you know? Later on, folks from the West got wind of Chinese Zen Buddhism and some of them were dead set on giving Zen meditation a shot. Back when the People's Republic of China was just getting started, we kind of shut ourselves off from the rest of the world, right? We weren't really into mingling with other countries. So, those Americans who wanted to practice Zen meditation, what did they do? They headed to Japan because Zen Buddhism had made its way there, and Japan had its own Zen Buddhist leaders. They tagged along with these Zen masters to practice, but after more than 10 years, none of them had that aha moment. They knew there was this ultimate state to achieve, but they just couldn't crack it. So, why did they fail? You get it, right? Their native language definitely wasn't Chinese, because practicing Zen meditation doesn't mean keeping quiet, you gotta talk first. Zen Buddhism preaches not through written words, but ironically, Zen Buddhism has left behind the most quantity of written texts among all the Buddhist sections. It's a bit of a head-scratcher, isn't it? You know, Zen Buddhism actually makes a lot of sense. When it says, does not rely on written words, it's basically saying that the truth isn't just found in books and concepts. You might have all these fancy writings, like Hegel's big works on spirit, nature, history, and mind, but does that mean you found the truth? Nope, because the truth isn't just in words. That's why Zen Buddhism says to not rely on written words. But if you really want to understand the truth, you gotta start by speaking. That's why Zen Buddhism wants to have a chat with you. The Zen masters don't talk much, but every word they say is pushing you to a point where you've got nowhere to stand, no way back. And at that moment, there's a chance of reaching something that can't be put into words. Because when you've got no ground to stand on, you can't say anything anymore, right? That's when the Dharma might be passed on to you. When the Dharma is passed on, you awaken, but it's something that is hard to describe. So the purpose of Zen Buddhism when it speaks to us is to help us reach the state of the speechlessness as quickly as possible. If we reach it too slowly, then it means someone is just spewing out a bunch of words, writing a philosophical treatise with hundreds of thousands of words, and still not reaching speechlessness. Therefore, every time I write a book, I always aim to meet this requirement. It's when the reader reaches the last paragraph of my book and finally realizes that it's beyond words. That's when the hundreds of thousands of words I've written have a reason to exist. If the reader says, "Oh, Mr. Wang's book is well written, let us discuss further," then it's over. If they still have something left to say, then my philosophical book becomes unnecessary to read, right? There are quite a few writings left behind by Zen Buddhism, and what are these writings? They document Zen Buddhist koans or settings, with over 1,000 koans recorded. Each koan is an example of a Zen master enlightening another person. Of course, some are dialogues, but some aren't dialogues, they're scenes, like hitting or making a large noise. Sometimes, the master just hits you without saying anything, using a stick or scolding, and so on. Alright, now let's talk about the wisdom of Zen Buddhism from the Platform Sutra. Let me start with this point. We have been learning from the West for over 100 years. Because at the beginning of modern history in China, it was the first time in our history that we encountered a more powerful culture, known as Western culture. Before this, we had never encountered a culture from another ethnicity that we could clearly see was superior to ours. You can conquer us, our country may fall, but if you want to rule over us, you must use our culture, right? Otherwise, you cannot rule over us. We have fallen twice. Once during the Yuan dynasty and once during the Qing dynasty. Hey, those from other ethnicities who ruled over us chose to adopt our culture. Alright, finally, we encountered a more powerful culture called Western culture, and we were unable to resist it. Later, we began to earnestly and humbly learn from them. Hey, we learned from our teachers who used to beat us, taking the West as our teacher, learning for over 100 years, learning their tools, techniques, and systems, right? Learning their science, learning their philosophy. We even introduced the philosophies of Kant and Hegel to China. More than 100 years have passed. Have we become Westerners? No, we are still Chinese. No matter what, we find it hard to become Westerners, even if we embrace everything about them. For example, if you believe in Christianity, there are quite a few Christians in China now, right? But don't equate them with European Christians. The majority of Chinese Christians follow all the rules and rituals of Christianity for worship and prayer. But now, when a Chinese Christian is praying, is he thinking about theological concepts? No, not usually. What is he thinking about? Lord, my son is taking the college entrance examination this year. I have been serving you wholeheartedly. Please help me this time. He prays sincerely, but his prayers are all about fulfilling Chinese values. Agree? He doesn't think that his soul is sinful and needs salvation. He doesn't think about this issue. Does a sinful soul think about this when praying? No. You say he is a Christian, but only in form. Respect for God is in a way similar to respect for bodhisattvas, right? So, let's not expect ourselves to become Westerners, and we shouldn't expect to. Doesn't Chinese people have such high wisdom? Why is it that no matter how much we try, we can't become Westerners? What is the root cause? It lies in language, Chinese language. As long as the domain of our language is Chinese, we are inevitably within Chinese thinking. Let's first talk about what language means. What is the scientific understanding of human language? The scientific perspective on language considers it as a set of symbolic tools invented by intelligent creatures, humans, who are smarter than other animals. We use individual words as symbols to label external things, and then we organize these words into sentences to store and convey information and knowledge. Science understands human language in this way. This is the scientific viewpoint on language, which sees language merely as a symbolic tool. This understanding misses the essence of language. What is language? The home of human existence. People make their home in language. This is a statement by the great German philosopher Heidegger. In the 20th century, Heidegger, the greatest philosopher in Germany, wrote Being and Time. He said that people make their home in language. How should we understand this? People exist within language, and only then do they have the description of a world, and the world presents itself to them. Animals do not have language, so they do not have a world in this sense. Animals are only placed in a narrow environment, and being in an environment is not the same as being in a world. However, humans have the world presented to them, with the heavens, the earth, mountains, rivers, and stars presenting themselves to humans. Why? Because people have language. How did God create humans according to the Old Testament? He created them from clay. Creating humans from clay only forms their physical bodies, but they are not complete yet. The final step is still missing. What is this final step? God breathed a breath into the formed human body, and what was the result? People gained language. The Bible story about God creating humans might sound a bit out there, but there's actually some wisdom in it that shows how important language is to us. It's through language that we become truly human and understand the world around us. Our whole experience of the world is shaped by language. Our basic understanding of the world comes from our language, and it forms the foundation of our emotions and attitudes towards life. Then let's take a look at Chinese, which is the mother tongue of our nation. How does it compare to European languages? The difference is huge. What are European languages? They are part of the Indo-European language family, right? Are they Latinized? Are they written in alphabets? Yes. And what about Chinese? It's not. There are fundamental differences in nature. So when we talk about the basic understanding of the world, the framework of understanding, the basic emotions, and the attitude towards life of the Chinese language and the Chinese people, they are completely different from those of Europeans in European languages. On the level of rational logic, we can communicate, right? We can create a translation software specifically for translating technical literature, no problem. But can you use a software to translate the philosophical works of Hegel, or the Bible, or the works of Heidegger? It's very difficult. Or use a translation software to successfully translate the I Ching or the Tao Te Ching into European languages? This is very difficult, my friends. So when we are in the world of Chinese language, we are just Chinese. Saying that we are Chinese is not a concept of race, not a concept of ethnicity. Saying that we are Chinese means that at the fundamental level of thinking, we still have a Chinese way of thinking. It defines our understanding of the world, our emotions, and our attitude towards life. In this respect, we are always Chinese, no matter we wear a suit and tie, eat at McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, or watch Hollywood movies, we are still Chinese. In Chinese thinking, the main pillars are Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Other schools of thought like Moism and legalism have faded away. Confucianism and Taoism later merged and Buddhism was also incorporated. During the time of the Han Dynasty, Buddhism made its way into China. From the end of the Western Han Dynasty to the beginning of the Eastern Han Dynasty, Chinese scholars worked hard to translate, understand, and absorb Buddhist scriptures. And guess what? We succeeded in making the Buddhist scriptures speak Chinese. This was a big deal, like when Martin Luther translated the Bible into German for the Germanic people. By making the Buddhist scriptures speak Chinese, Buddhist ideas became a crucial part of Chinese thinking, alongside Confucianism and Taoism. And as a bonus, our Chinese language got a bunch of new words like wu, karma, truth, consciousness, and more. How did these words end up in the Chinese language? There were originally no such words in Chinese. But when Buddhist scriptures were translated into Chinese, a bunch of new words like karma and others made their way into our everyday language. When we use these words, we're actually tapping into Buddhist ideas. And it's not just Buddhism. When we say Ren, benevolence, we're speaking from a Confucian perspective. And when we say Wu Wei or Wu Bu Wei, doing nothing but accomplishing everything, we're getting into Taoist thinking. So, any Chinese words that embody the basic ideas of Confucianism, Taoism, or Buddhism can't really be translated into European languages like German, Spanish, French, or English. I'll give you another example. Yuan Fen, how would you translate it into English? For instance, we often say, "It's Yuan Fen that I met you," with plenty emotion, using the word Yuan Fen. What does it mean? Firstly, it indicates chance, right? It's not like I know you in advance, so I'm deeply moved by this. It's fate, a matter of chance. But the term Yuan Fen expresses not only randomness but also inevitability. Why do Chinese people say this? It takes 500 years of cultivation to share the same boat. This implies that it's also destined because it results from 500 years of cultivation. You see, the word Yuan Fen not only represents chance but also inevitability. It encompasses a pair of opposing categories, chance and inevitability, within this single word. How do you translate it into English? In English, you can easily find a word to express chance, right? You can also find a word to express inevitability, right? But you will never find a word that expresses both chance and inevitability. So, when you tell a foreigner that a visiting scholar has arrived, and it's a British professor, and you're happy to meet him, as a Chinese person, you might say, "It's fate that I met you." How could you possibly say this in English? If you say "lucky" in the end, it ultimately means that I met you by luck. But where is the inevitability in that? It's nowhere to be found. Alright, so when we talk about the concept of Yuan Fen, we already have an understanding of Buddhist philosophy. When a couple gets married and becomes husband and wife, this is both accidental and inevitable, right? Chinese people have this understanding, but when you try to explain it to a foreigner, they don't get it. What do you mean by something being both accidental and inevitable? It's quite interesting. I remembered an incident from many years ago when we had a British philosophy professor visiting as a scholar at the philosophy department of Fudan University. We arranged various academic activities for him at the department and, of course, extended our hospitality by inviting him to dinner. During the meal, the British philosophy professor suddenly asked me a question. I have studied a bit of sinology before, and I know that there is a very important aspect of Chinese thought called Chan, Zen Buddhism, which is the sinicization of Buddhism. I said, that's right. So, can you tell me what the core concept of Chan Buddhism is? I blurted out 2 Chinese characters, Ju Wu. Since he didn't understand Chinese, he asked, what is Ju Wu? Please translate it into English for me. I suddenly felt at a loss. It wasn't because my English wasn't good, my understanding of English is excellent. I had worked as an editor at the Shanghai Translation Publishing House for 5 years, and the publishing house specializes in translating works. What does an editor do? On the left, there's an original English book, and on the right, there's the translator's draft. As the responsible editor, I was afraid of any translation errors, so I meticulously proofread word by word and sentence by sentence. I would read a sentence in English on the left and then read the corresponding Chinese sentence on the right, back and forth, like a rotating electric fan. I did this for a full 5 years, accumulating a large amount of English vocabulary. Now, this British philosophy professor was asking me to translate Ju Wu into English. My first reaction was inspiration, but later I realized that it was not right, as inspiration means a sudden creative idea, not awakening. Then I thought of the word understanding, but later found out that it was also not suitable. Understanding means comprehension, and the activity of comprehension is not the same as the activity of awakening, right? For example, we use our understanding to comprehend Newton's 3 laws of motion, which is a cognitive activity. But we Chinese people often use the words Ju Wu a lot, right? For example, if I say to you, you need Ju Wu, you'd immediately understand what I mean. You wouldn't misunderstand and think I'm asking you to have knowledge. That's not what I mean. Hoping you have Ju Wu is not the same as hoping you have knowledge, right? Having knowledge doesn't mean having Ju Wu. So, I finally ran out of words, and I had to tell the British philosophy professor that I couldn't find any word in the entire English vocabulary to translate Ju Wu. This can only mean that the English-speaking culture lacks this concept, which left him feeling very frustrated. Seeing him so frustrated, I felt sorry and thought I should help him, even though I couldn't find an equivalent word to translate Ju Wu. I could try a different approach, like explaining what Ju Wu is by a lengthy talk. So, I started explaining very seriously, and I talked for a good half an hour. After that half hour, I felt like I had made it very clear, but I found that he still looked confused. I finally gave up. I thought to myself, was I too ambitious? Did I really think I could explain a whole culture's thinking in just half an hour? How is that possible? Back in the day, it took several generations of effort from the Han Dynasty to the Tang Dynasty for us Chinese to accomplish something like translating, understanding, and absorbing Buddhist scriptures. It took several generations of effort to sinicize Buddhism. How could that be achieved in just half an hour?